What if The Godfather had magic, and the Corleones could tear out your soul with a glare? You'd get the vibe and gritty undercurrent that runs through Jade City by Fonda, a book with the pacing of a prize fight, the atmosphere of a gritty gangster drama, and the emotional punch of a family tragedy. Let's talk about the sharp prose, the immersive world building, and the emotional gut punch that is Call Lon. But first, who is Fonda? Fonda is a Canadian author, best known for the book we read, Jade City, and its associated trilogy, The Greenbone Saga. Her first book, the YA sci-fi novel Zero Boxer, was published by Flux Books in 2015 and nominated for the Andre Norton Award, the Nebula Award for middle grade and YA fiction, in 2016. After that, she released the Exo duology for young adults through Scholastic Books starting in 2017, the same year that Jade City released. Her debut adult novel was published by Orbit Books to critical acclaim, winning the World Fantasy Award and Aurora Awards for Best Novel, and was nominated for the Nebula Award in the same category for 2018. It was also on Time Magazine's Best Fantasy Books of All Time list 4 years later. This was my first experience with this author's work, and I gotta say, that one random Library of a Viking video, it supplied another banger. I really enjoyed Lee's writing style. It was snappy and kept the plot moving. Especially early on, the rhythm of her storytelling felt like punches rolling in, one after another. That staccato pacing works incredibly well with the gritty atmosphere of Janloon and the intensity of the story. She doesn't waste time on unnecessary ornamentation. The prose is lean and deliberate, so when the writing does swell into something grander, it feels earned, and those moments carry more weight because of their rarity. This sharp style also carries over into the dialogue. Whenever it's needed, there's a palpable urgency behind what the characters are saying, and Lee's prose backs that up. Conversations in this book are rarely just conversations. They're tactical, emotional, layered, and the pounding rhythm is always there to heighten those moments, making the lines land like blows against the characters when needed. And when the characters stop speaking and start throwing actual punches, the fight scenes are equally tight. They're not drawn out or overly choreographed. Lee gives us just enough to feel the momentum and brutality of what's happening with visceral efficiency. And then we're out, and the story pushes forward again. The only downside to all of this forward motion was that I had a hard time getting a handle on the time period of the story at first. When I began reading, I imagined a kind of 1950s setting, old school gangsters in three-piece suits and fedoras, with a touch of magic. But then things started shifting. Character ages and certain technologies nudged my mental timeline around. Someone mentioned a copy machine, and suddenly I was picturing the 80s with its room-sized Xerox machines like in 9 to 5. If you know, you know. Eventually, after settling into the details, Lon being in his 30s and his father having died in what is essentially a World War II equivalent, I landed somewhere around the 70s. And from then on, everything had that vibe. Except maybe the cars. For whatever reason, I kept picturing cars from the 30s and 40s. I guessed gangsters' cars just have to have swooping fenders and running boards in my mind. Despite that minor confusion, the world building itself is incredibly strong. And I don't just mean strong in a general way. I mean it in a structural sense. The world of Jade City never wobbles. There's never a moment where it feels like Lee bends the rules of her setting to make the plot work. Kekon feels real. It feels lived in. Like a place you could walk through, grab hold of, and really feel with your hands. Lee's writing style backs that up. She rarely slows down to spoon-feed you lore or explain every cultural detail. She trusts the readers to keep up. Concepts, slang, traditions, they're introduced naturally through action and dialogue, not exposition dumps. It's immersive. You learn the rules of the world by experiencing them, and then you just know them. Not because she stopped the story to explain, but because she let you live in it long enough for those things to become a second nature. Kekon doesn't shout its world building at you. Jade City sets you down in the middle of it, points your head in a direction and says, go. And as the story rolls through the restaurants, streets, and mansions, you take it all in without even realizing it. And that's the mark of a story that trusts its setting and trusts the reader. Thus far in our discussions, I haven't really named favorite characters, beyond my obvious love of Poirot last month, but this time, I can easily say Call Lon is my favorite character. There's something about his deep internal conflict that defines his leadership, who he is. Ultimately, it seals his fate, and I can connect with that. Lon is not his father or grandfather. He doesn't embody the warrior spirit that traditionally defines the Pillars of No Peak. Instead, he's a businessman and a politician, someone who leads with caution and diplomacy. He's trying to modernize a system rooted in tradition and violence, and that difference isolates him. His vision puts him at odds with the culture of his clan, deepening the insecurities he already harbors about his personal worth and legitimacy. What makes Lon compelling is that he knows he's different, and he tries to compensate for it. He pushes himself to be tougher, to act more like the warrior leaders who came before him, to try and be more hero than he actually is. But this pressure to be something he's not ultimately creates the very weakness he fears. His inability to show weakness, to admit doubt or vulnerability, is what ironically leads to him being weak in the moment it counted the most. To me, that's an incredibly interesting lesson to assign to a character whose existence doesn't revolve around physical strength in the same way his brother Hilo's does. Lon's tragedy is quieter. It's more internal, but is still devastating. In contrast, Hilo knows exactly who he is. He's emotionally confident, comfortable in his identity as the Horn, and never doubts he is where he should be in No Peak's hierarchy. But after Lon's death, Hilo doesn't just inherit the title of Pillar, he inherits Lon's burden of doubt. And unlike Lon, who internalizes that conflict, Hilo responds with additional bravado, refusing to let go of his identity as a warrior even as he steps into his new role as head of the family. That refusal is what sends the clan deeper into conflict with the mountain. It forces Hilo down the path he creates for himself and those he loves, one shaped by not only rage and vengeance, but his inability to leave the streets and look at things from the Pillar's perspective, the way Lon did. Lon's death doesn't just alter the story, it reframes it. When he dies, it feels like the end of the book, as if the core of the story has collapsed. The fact that the novel continues after his death makes it feel like we've stepped into another book entirely. We cared about it enough by that point that his loss rattled us readers just as it rattles the characters that are still alive. Their world feels hollow and off balance in his absence, and so does the narrative. That shift is what makes his death memorable. The issue I had after Lon's death was finding the reason to keep moving forward. As much as I liked them, I wasn't emotionally driven to continue because of the other characters' arcs at first. What kept me going was the uncertainty. The what the hell is going to happen next feeling. Lon's absence creates a void, and that void becomes the tension that strings us along through the transition into Hilo's time as Pillar. His death isn't just a plot point, it's a fracture. And we spend the rest of the book trying to navigate the pieces left for us. And then, what the heck was that ending? I liked it, but at the same time I kind of hated it. The moment we've been anticipating for much of the book. The graduation of the desperately needed next generation of Greenbones. The moment that's supposed to reinforce the clan and move No Peak forward. Just when it felt like the family was stabilizing, even if only barely, everything fractures again. Because Emery refuses his Jade. And in front of everyone. It hits like another one of those punches that we talked about. What's wild is that throughout the book, this character clearly struggled with his abilities and his place in the Call family. He wrestled with insecurities and his family's legacy, much like Lon did in his own way. But by the end, it seemed like he was growing past that, like he was moving forward and coming into his own. He made it through the emotional gauntlet of the story. He repeats the oaths to the Pillar for a second time, and then right there on stage in front of everyone, he lets his completely reasonable fears win out and just folds. Not that the twist was unearned. It does make sense. He'd been through hell, and the weight of his mother's legacy never really left him. But it was jarring. It felt like watching someone walk a long road toward healing only to veer off at the last second. It wasn't disappointing because it didn't make sense. It was disappointing because it did, and it hurt. The ending gave me little closure. It gave me unease, which is probably the point. Even with things calming down, the future of the clan still feels uncertain, and that feeling, that tension, is what's going to pull me into the next book. Because I liked Jade City. I liked Jade City a lot. Enough to regret that Jade War, its sequel, is not the next book on our list. Enough to give Jade City 4 out of 5 stars. And I will get around to reading Jade War when I get time to. But that won't be anytime soon, because next month we're reading Phoenix Rising, a Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences novel by Pip Ballantyne and T. Morris. I am no stranger to the writing of T and Pip. I've read several of their solo projects and enjoy both quite a bit. I was actively listening to a lot of audiobooks when this series first launched, and eagerly listened to all of the podcasted content these two put out ahead of this first novel. So I am happy to finally be reading it, and even more happy to be sharing it with you. But what is it about? Well, steam and London and, well, here's what the back of the book has to say. In the shadowed alleys of Victorian London, something sinister stirs, and it's up to an unlikely duo to stop it. People are vanishing only to wash up as lifeless, bloodless corpses along the Thames. But the Ministry of Peculiar Occurrences, Britain's secretive agency for the strange and unsettling, refuses to investigate. Enter Eliza D. Braun, fearless and fierce and armed with dynamite and a bulletproof corset. She won't let the case go, even if it means dragging her reluctant new partner, the nervous librarian, Wellington Books, into the fray. Together, they'll confront a deadly brotherhood lurking in the shadows, bent on enslaving the entire nation. Books has the knowledge, Braun has the firepower, but can they unravel this dark conspiracy before Britain falls to the Phoenix? You'll have to read it with us in June to find out. This book can be found in the usual places, so check the description for links to the options, but the best option is always supporting your favorite local bookstore. And now, as my face is again covered by the subscribe button, the book club playlist, and the Liam of Karkan playlist, I say to you, go enjoy a book.